In fact, the most I would get in a year was one period. Just lose weight. My left ovary had more cysts, or it was the most. I had PCOS symptoms for years, but I didn't know. Hi, my name is Upenda Nice Barasa, and this is how I got diagnosed with PCOS. Just for context, I had my first period at 12. I was in primary school, but throughout my primary school education, I don't remember much about my cycle. However, in high school, I noticed that my period was never regular. I would miss like almost every month. It started pretty slow. Like I would have a period in January, skip February, and then have another one in March. But by the time I was in my second year of high school, my period would come every 3 months. And I also noticed that it would only come when I had an emotional high. For example, I was in boarding school, and every time we went home, it was closing day. Obviously, everyone is excited. Your hormones are all over the place. That's when my period would come. When something exciting was happening, for example, I was going on a trip, or I was just going to do something exciting, my birthday, I'm getting money from somebody, I'm just involved in something that I felt excited about, that's when my period would show up. So every time I would go back to school, I would never even buy pads because I knew I still have pads from January. It's April and I haven't used them, so I don't need any more. During this period, I was dealing with acne. My acne also progressed the same way my periods did. I remember just having 1 or 2 pimples in primary school because I was also in boarding school for 2 years, but it wasn't as bad. But from my second year in high school, my acne got progressively worse. And I remember one time standing in assembly and a friend of mine asked, "Oh, this side of your face looks okay, but this side is terrible." Her words. And I remember feeling some type of way. So fast forward, after high school, my acne got worse, my periods got worse. At this point, I was never concerned about my periods because I was enjoying not having a period. And every time I talked to a doctor or to my mom, they would say, that's just normal. It's hormonal imbalance. And throughout high school, I remember throwing that word around like, I just have hormonal imbalance. And in high school, we used to just want stupid things. For example, there are people who just wanted to wear glasses. There are others who just wanted to have braces. So having hormonal imbalance is like my braces and glasses type of thing. It was like a humble brag, which in hindsight, it really wasn't. But at that time, because I didn't understand the implications, it just felt nice to say, hey, I do have hormonal imbalance, so I never get a period every month. But in the same high school, my acne was terrible. I even thought it's dairy. And yes, to some extent, when I would consume dairy every day, by the way, I would take a packet of milk every single day for 4 years in high school. And after high school is when I realized that dairy was also contributing to my acne. But that's a story for another day. In 2018, I was waiting to join university. But obviously in Kenya, during that period, you're at home, you have nothing to do, so you have a lot of time on your hands. And I was on YouTube trying to find a solution for my acne. Acne really affected my life so much. My confidence, the person that I am today, was greatly impacted by my acne at that point. I even started a whole podcast called the Free My Skin podcast. If you guys watch my podcast episodes, that's where that name came from. It's because I was so impacted in a way that I just couldn't sit. I felt like I needed an outlet to speak about my acne experience, because in Africa, to be specific, people don't even know the term acne. Of course, at that time, right now it's a bit popular, but there are so many parents, even just educated people who have never heard of the term acne. To them, it's just pimples or you're just breaking out, but they don't know it has like a scientific or medical term to it. So in the process of trying to find a solution for my acne, I came across a YouTuber. Her name is Wahura Kabutha. She's famous in Kenya. And she just had a video talking about her acne, and she said she went to the doctor and the doctors did a test and she was told she has a hormonal condition called PCOS. And I was very curious. I'm like, okay, do I have this condition? So I started doing my research on PCOS, but not in that moment. During that season, I was like, maybe I'm just overthinking because this PCOS thing sounds like a very, very heavy term. What do you mean polycystic ovarian syndrome? That sounds heavy. And from the African context, we tend to judge things by how heavy it sounds, like cancer, polycystic ovarian syndrome, fibroids, like endometriosis. They sound so serious. And of course they are, but I'm just trying to say that when something sounds that serious, we tend to dismiss it. It's like, oh, maybe that's not what I have. When I did dig deeper about PCOS, at this time, by the way, my periods had gotten heavier. Remember, they were like almost non-existent. They were very irregular, but we had gotten to a point where they come still every other month, every 2 or 3 months. But when they do, they would last 2 weeks. And many a times, if I don't go to the hospital and get something to stop it, they would never stop. So I would go 2 weeks and then get medication. Sometimes the medication would not work and I would have to get an injection. During COVID, I remember in 2020, 2021, I decided to go and get my first PCOS diagnosis. And at this point, I had talked to my mom about my regular periods and everything that I was experiencing. And during COVID as well, I was depressed. I was very irritable. And my dad used to tell me, like, there's one time he sat me down and he said, "You're so emotional. You're very sensitive." I was always shouting. I hated people asking me questions. I hated talking to people. When somebody would tell me to do something, I just got irritated. I would shout every time. I would cry a lot. My acne was bad. Let me not even go into it. But basically, that's when I started experiencing my emotions were not okay. My mental health was not okay. But I didn't realize until after that talk. And even during that talk, I felt like he just didn't understand me. But in hindsight, that's when my symptoms had peaked, right? I couldn't even sleep, by the way. I couldn't sleep at all. Like, I could spend a whole night just watching movies. But tomorrow morning, I would wake up at 6, right? And that night, I will still not fall asleep, despite having not slept the previous night. Yeah, the insomnia was terrible. So when I went to see the doctor, I explained my symptoms, yeah. The doctor told me, hey, we need to go and have a PCOS diagnosis. Because even when I went there, I went with information. I told him, hey, I suspect I have PCOS, but I need to get it tested, right? And he said, yeah, I think all those symptoms that you've described that you have all lead to PCOS. So let's do an ultrasound. So I had an ultrasound, like the physical one, just on top of your tummy. And the results were negative. But the doctor said, because your symptoms are very peculiar to PCOS, you'll have to come back tomorrow and do the transvaginal ultrasound. Basically, they take a camera inside of you and they use it to check. Unfortunately, I didn't go back because it was COVID season and I just gave up. And I remember going home with those results and showing my mom, and I don't fault her for this, but she didn't know any better at that point. She was like, yeah, you see, you're just exaggerating. Like, I was dismissed, basically. I was dismissed and I was told, you see, your results were negative. But at that point, I knew something was wrong. During that season as well, when I noticed my mental health was in disarray, I gained so much weight. I'm going to put a picture on the screen of me in uni around 2018, and I would put a picture of me in 2020, 2021, so you guys can see the difference. 2 years later, I finally got my diagnosis. I remember in 2023, I went to see a doctor at this famous hospital in Kenya called Mediheal. Mediheal has specialized in women and reproductive health, so they were very good with things like anything pertaining women and reproductive health. So I went there, found a very nice doctor. But I told her, hey, I suspect that I do have PCOS, but I've done a test before and it was negative. But the doctor told me to go back, but I never went back for the diagnosis. So I am back because at this point in 2021, 2022, 2023, all the way to 2024, my periods had completely disappeared. And that, in fact, the most I would get in a year was 1 period. The maximum, 2 periods in a year. So on a good year, I get 2 periods. On a bad year, I get one period. And by the way, the one period was never natural. It was one that was triggered by something. I got to a point whereby I would even just take birth control so that I would have a period. And sometimes going to hospital, the doctors would still give you birth control to help regulate your hormones. But basically, it was just a fake period. At least for me, that was a fake period. It wasn't natural. So my periods had disappeared. We did the ultrasound, the physical one. Again, the doctor didn't see anything. It's like, oh, that's negative. And then he asked whether we could do the transvaginal diagnosis, and we did it, and it was confirmed that my left ovary, I remember he said that my left ovary had more cysts, or it was the most affected compared to my right one. I don't know whether he meant my right one didn't have any, but he specifically mentioned the left ovary. Yeah. And the words I was told in that office was just lose weight. Those words haunt me. I was given medication and advice, which I will talk about later in a different episode. If you're watching this video and you have been diagnosed with PCOS, or you're just finding out about PCOS, please tell me your story in the comment section. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, this is your sign to subscribe, because I'm going to share my entire journey from how I started healing my PCOS and what are the lifestyle changes that have helped me throughout this journey. See you again in episode 2 next week. Bye. But I realized that's when I started gaining weight during COVID. But I didn't think much of it because I was like, we're home. And also body dysmorphia is a thing. Even now that I've lost weight, I don't see myself any different from when I was heavier.